Hey everyone, welcome back to another segment of AWS On Air. We are live here in Anaheim, California for the 2023 AWS Reinforce Conference. My name is Jeff Marushak, one of your co-hosts today. I am a senior solutions architect on our DoD Air Force team, so security is near and dear to my heart. But I want to introduce my co-host, Alana. Alana, say hi.
Hello, it's nice to be here again with you. We are having a great time here, and I'm Alana Kelton. I am a senior product manager with AWS Launch Marketing, and we have a couple guests with us today.
Yeah, we have Brent and Manuel talking here about Amazon Detective. I have a lot of questions, but guys, go ahead and introduce yourselves.
Hey everyone, my name is Brent Maynard, and I'm a product manager for Amazon Detective.
And I'm Manuel Martinez. I'm a security engineer at Amazon Detective.
Great. All right, so let's start off. I prepped you guys, but as we talk about, we give a lot of like AWS 101 meetings and the key security. There's always a security section in here that is the key security general services. Guard duty always comes up. Inspector comes up. I know we're going to talk about those two, but how does Detective fit in? Let's start off with what is Detective and how does it differ from guard duty? Let's start there.
That's a great question. So I'll answer it kind of backwards. So when we look at like guard duty and inspector, they're finding things. They're detection services, and they are passing those detections down to detective. And detective is, I think of the meme where you have the guy with the cork board and stitching all the pictures together and the red lines. That's detective, right?
Okay.
Detective is piecing all of those disparate detections together, whether it's a vulnerability or a threat, and just how resources interact with each other. And it tells the story that, you know, at the gate you don't get.
Okay, so then let me pretend I'm a customer, and maybe some of our viewers might be asking this. Well, I thought everything goes to Security Hub. So what you just kind of described sounds a little bit like Security Hub, but tell us, it sounds like Detective's in between those services and then Security Hub. But let me know, tell me.
Kinda. Detective actually interacts with Security Hub as well, which I understand how that could be a little confusing at first. When we look at Security Hub, they're like the master aggregator of all signals. They're looking at CSPM, they're looking at different findings and threats from, you know, all the sources.
Sure.
And we've actually recently started an integration with Security Hub, and we're bringing in those findings as well from 8 new providers that work that include Inspector, but also help supplement with guard duty, which is really helpful for Detective because now we're getting more and more signal, which allows us to have better detections and better telemetry when it comes to threats and how threats move through your environment.
Gotcha. Okay, so what's new with Detective?
That's a great question. We're really excited. We actually have a launch going on. Well, our launch happened during the keynote, but we have our main breakout session for it right now with Rich Vorwaller, who's one of my peers on the PM side, and then Rima, and of course a customer. And they're talking about how inspector findings that are now in our algorithm that we call finding groups. So finding groups allows all these disparate findings, and if they're part of a single attack, we actually can stitch them together. And if we stitch them together and we say, okay, we have a guard duty threat and we have an inspector vulnerability, what's the likelihood of that crossover? And did that vulnerability likely lead to that threat?
So inspector might see, like, correct me if I'm wrong, like this EC2 instance, it has port 22 open on a security group, and guard duty happened to see that there was some odd SSH activity on that. Now, that's a very simple example, but to paint the picture, then Detective would see that and correlate those two and say, hey, we think this EC2 machine's involved, and here's why, and here's some of the findings.
Definitely, and to take it even a step further, you think about all these major vulnerabilities that drop, and they're very publicized, and often the first question that customers have is, does this impact me? And if you have Inspector turned on and you're getting those scans, and then the next question is, well, has it been exploited? Is this in my environment already? Do I need to do anything now? And that is the story that we're able to piece together for our customers that we weren't able to previously do.
All right, let me ask you this. This is a little off script a little bit, but explain the difference between Inspector and guard duty.
Great question.
Because you're now ingesting both of those into Detective. So,
yeah. So when I look at Inspector's looking at all of my resources, and it's scanning them, and it's telling me based on whether it's a code scan, and I think Kashish just had a Lambda launch where they're doing inline code scanning, which is really awesome. So that just happened here as well. So if there's new vulnerabilities that Inspector is finding, it can pass it to us, which that is a risk, right? A customer knows that there's something wrong, but it hasn't necessarily been abused yet or exploited. And then when we move to the guard duty side, guard duty is looking for active exploitation.
Things that have happened.
Or happening.
Yeah, okay.
Right?
That's even better, yeah.
Yeah, so if somebody's actively, seeing pain from somewhere out in the internet coming inbound, guard duty is going to say, hey, there's a bad thing happening. We need to do something. And an inspector can say, oh, hey, this is bad because this bad thing that's happening here is also on this EC2 instance, for example.
Yeah, and the example everyone uses, which paints a really great picture for guard duty, is that an EC2 machine's been popped and it's being used for Bitcoin mining.
Right.
We would never see that logged into the EC2. If these are my machines, you would never see that. But guard duty would see the general traffic and the traits that go and will alert and say, we know this EC2 machine is doing this. So
Exactly.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah.
So can you show us a little bit how this works? See your laptop's hooked up.
Do you want to just jump right into the demo then?
Yeah.
Okay, let's do it. So let's see. I'm gonna close this and then open the demo. So,
All right. We'll bring up the screen, I think. All right. I see Detective, and we're at the summary screen now.
yeah. So we're in the summary page of Detective. This is what you first see when you get into our service. The first thing that I want to show is how, like with this new integration of security findings from Security Hub, how do you turn it on, right? So you can go here to General, and right now we have it already on, but you will go to click on Edit, and it's as simple as clicking on this button here, and then clicking Save, and then AWS, like Detective already starts collecting the findings from Security Hub that are being aggregated in Security Hub.
Okay.
So that's the first thing that I wanted to show. And then the second one now, which is what we just launched to the at this Inforce, is how do we correlate these new inspector findings, or these inspector findings, with our already existing finding groups, right? So we can go here to finding groups. Finding groups is what Brent was talking about like correlation of different findings and resources that are involved in those findings together. And we also map them from the findings tactics to the minor attack ones. Here we can see that there's only like one finding group in this detective graph. We have the tactics that are involved in it. You can list the resources and findings by severity. This is just like a summary view where you can understand which finding group you wanna investigate next. In this case, there's only one, so let's jump right into it.
Really quick, can we go back?
Yeah.
This might be a silly question, but I don't see a button for like new finding group, and there's only one here. Can you have multiples? And is this like a manual addition?
Finding groups are automatically generated by Detective. So yeah, so
Gotcha.
Detective does that correlation already for you, and brings findings together, so you don't have to do that.
Makes sense. Okay.
A quick note, right? So we talked a bit about guard duty findings and inspector findings and how it's looking at all of your resources. That can be a lot of findings.
Yeah.
Right? So how do you know which ones to choose? Finding groups is that differentiator where you say, oh, if I log into Detective, let's say Monday morning, because that's when I start my shift, and this is my coffee, right? I get started, get my day going, and I have a finding group. I know my day just kind of changed a little bit, because a finding group means I have something serious to take care of.
Mm-hmm.
Makes total sense. Okay, gotcha.
Yeah. So here's the finding group that we have right now. First of all, we can see like some details. There's like a finding group ID in case you want to get reference it for additional investigations, the severity of the finding group, and the status of it, normally active. Parent and child finding groups finding groups can merge into one, like two of them can merge into one. So if that happened, you will be able to see if it merged, it will be on the parent side of things, and if it's
why would they merge?
When there's like some new findings that relate resources that are part of both two finding groups, that means that finding group is likely to be bigger event that you need to investigate together. We think of finding groups as findings that should be investigated together. So that's when there's like new findings that join resources that are in two previously existing finding groups, that's when they merge. Yeah. So to me, like the coolest thing about finding groups that we launched recently as well was is this visualization. I'm gonna like make it a little bit smaller so we can fit it on the screen.
Sure.
And this visualization is what it's gonna help you like understand your different findings and how they're related together, right? We have 3 types of layouts. We have like circle layout and grid layout, and then the one that we show by default, which is force directed. And in here, you're able to like select like different resources, and you would see like this in case this is an EC2 instance, or you can select a finding, and then you see that it's like a port scan. You can always like select. You can also like select multiple findings, and in here you can see that these are actually like the inspector findings that we were talking about, right? So there's like 2 CVEs in this EC2 instance, as well as a reachability finding, right?
And so detective is thinking, okay, these 3 things are related. Gotcha. And so that goes back to my question of, can you create finding groups? The whole point of this is for detective to tell you, to educate you about things that you normally wouldn't think of. So I get it totally now.
Yeah, yeah. And so and in here you can see like there's like a bunch of different findings. I can guide you more or less through.
Yeah, can you walk through some of these? Like give us like the one you just picked was 3, but let's go through one of the bigger ones.
Like around here?
Yeah.
Yeah, so this is like a guard duty finding that represents that there's been like exfiltrated credentials, and they've been making API calls in your AWS account. So what you can see here is like the EC2 instance where those credentials were exfiltrated from. You can also see that EC2 instance had CVEs in it. So it's a good way of picturing together like what is a possible cause of those credentials how those credentials were exfiltrated, right? And you can see that there's like these 2 CVEs in here. And then from there, you can see that there is like a role associated to it.
What role is doing the acting? Yeah.
Correct, yeah. And not even the role, but also like the role session. And from here, you can always like go to investigate deeper in detective, right? You can open this, and then you can like start seeing like the traditional panels that detective has, where you can like go and review the API's activities, where they happen from, right? This is kind of interesting, right? Because you can see most of the API calls happen from this IP address, and there's only 4 that happen from this other one, right? So, and there's like S3, so there's like a easy way to start capturing signals from different places to start understanding what's going on, right?
Well, and I see the access key ID. I mean, one of the things we're taught to is immediately disable that access key, and this gets you there really quick. And with security, I can imagine people who track these incidents, what you just showed us was like a ton of information that you would have had to go find manually. Like just even what EC2 instance is doing this. I mean, it's one thing when you have you're playing around, you have 2 EC2 instances and 5 roles, but in an enterprise, at scale, it's hard to find these things, and looks like detective's going to be able to visually show you those things and help your security team get to the bottom of things.
And you learn over time when you, like Manuel was showing us the graph visualization of the attack chain there. When you look at them after time, you go, oh, I know exactly what's happening here, because you started to notice, you saw the EC2 instances, and then you saw the vulnerabilities hanging off the side.
You start to understand the matrix. You know,
exactly.
Stuff.
I think that seems to really help too. The visualization and then the deeper dive is like, that's like a really good combination, because you get full picture and then boom, you can go into what you really need to get at.
The role thing made sense to me, because it's just another thing. Like let's figure out what role's being used, and it's right there for you.
And it's flexible. Like Manuel, if you want to move a couple things around and like
you can always like move it to like put it the way that it works for you, right? Like if you don't feel like this is like the best like layout that you can do, like you can always like select a bunch of different nodes and then like move them around and say, okay, I want to like put this over here, then like I'll just focus on this stuff, right? And you can like move it around and select it to your liking. So it's very flexible in that regard.
Awesome.
Yeah. So in here, like I can like go a little bit over. Like you see that there's like this credential filtration finding that is associated with. It has like also the different more information around it, like the subnet of the EC2 instance that was involved with it, the VPC, the IP address, right? You can see 2 IP addresses, right? And this one being like it's actually the same one as we saw before. So we can start thinking about like, okay, maybe this is like something that I should be looking more into, and what else did it do in my environment? Like as a suspicious IP address, you can always, like, same as before, open it, start seeing findings associated with it. We already knew about these two. API calls, we also knew about it, right? Like we saw that these API calls were made from the previous role, but then you can also see if they exchange VPC flow volume with any of your EC2 instances, and directly from the same profile page. And you can see traffic patterns here. You can see that there's like some traffic from this instance to like port 8080 or port 8800. All of these are accepted, so you can start like seeing what kind of traffic happened from it, and how things are more or less related together to start understanding which could have been the root cause for it. In this case, let me...
Well, and while you're moving, you notice Manuel is showing us like port, source, and dest, and volume. One of the best things about Detective is that it's a managed service, right? We're ingesting CloudTrail, VPC flow, and all the findings for you. There's nothing to do.
Well, a lot of times we educate customers like, this is what VPC flow logs are, and if you want to get this information, you're going to have to offload them somewhere and look at them. This does that for you.
Right. Yeah, exactly. You don't have to manage those flows either, which is so awesome. Exactly,
yeah. And then the other piece that is interesting about this whole finding group is this S3 bucket, right? Like this S3 bucket is also here. You can see and go and see what's in the bucket, right? And thankfully, because we now ingest findings from Security Hub, and let's see when it loads, you can see that this bucket also has like PII in it, right? Which makes this even more important.
Well, can you go back to the graph?
Yeah, totally.
So what's that saying about that S3 bucket? Is that the S3 bucket has a finding related to it, or there is a finding that happens to be related to the S3 bucket? Which one is it?
So in this case, like the interesting bit about it, you like we've already talked about like the credential filtration finding, and this one has the same finding type, right? But what this finding type is telling us, because it's connected to an S3 bucket, is that this was captured from S3 data events, which means that the exfiltrated credentials made an data API call to the S3 bucket, basically.
Those roles in the green circles were used for,
Yeah, they were used to access this S3 bucket that had like PII in it. We can tell it from this profile page here, right? You can see that there's like the S3 object contains personal information. All of this is correlated already for you. It's not part of finding groups yet, but we have that information in the graph.
So was that a finding because there was PII data in the S3 bucket, or is it just because we knew it did something else? Here's what else this role did. We want to let you know about it.
That's it. So the finding it's agnostic of the data that's on S3 originally, but with Detective you can put those things together. So the finding is just telling you that like exfiltrated credentials have been used to access this bucket. The bucket may have been like have nothing, or have like information that's irrelevant, or in this case have PII that Macy tells you about.
Yeah. Because that's another tough job of a security team is, okay, we see an account got popped, let's fix that. But then you might forget, what did it do before we found it? And this is telling us that.
That's the nice thing about looking at the graph visualization portion too, because when you look for containment, like where is the best, containment, where should I start? And if we start like at blocking that IP address or containing it or changing the security policy or isolating the EC2 instance, now we know we're going to stop that access to that bucket.
Yeah, is there guidance on, like, for this picture, what's the guidance where to start? Is it the role? Is it the IP? Or is it up to you guys?
That's a great question. Typically, I would start with the findings. What am I working with?
Yeah.
When I see like I noticed with attack patterns, you start to see like, oh, is this an SSH brute force? You see a bunch of IP addresses. So I know I'm going to start at that EC2 instance that was subject of the attack. In this case, I might start at the bucket because my data is probably the thing I care about the most.
But this graph is going to help you determine where to start.
Correct.
Yeah. All right, so we're almost out of time. So how do folks get started on this? Because they may already have a security team already doing their operations in AWS, and maybe they want to look into this. How hard is this to play with, start getting involved, or what do you guys recommend?
We have workshops in Workshop Studio. That's probably the best way to get started because you can jump in and play. I'm a hands-on person, right?
Yeah.
So I want to get in there. I want to go through scenarios. Otherwise, get in and get started. We have a 30-day free trial. There's no reason not to get started there and understand, what it does for your environment. Your data is the best data.
Yeah, great. Well, guys, thank you very much for being here. This is really exciting. I appreciate it.
Thanks for having us.
Yep.
All right, so you want to take us out?
Oh, sure. We are going out now, and there's more coming up, so stay tuned.